All right, I think we are about ready to begin. I would like to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. I want to thank everyone who's attending. We have another great turnout for our latest webinar in the NIMBL lecture series. That's going to be SAP Personas, Cutting Access to Drive Productivity. I'm Jake Eisbart, part of the NIMBL marketing team. A little bit about NIMBL. We are SAP technologists and SAP ecosystem thought leaders. Our fully onshore consulting business, 50% of our work delivers SAP products, both technical and functional, while our Denver-based SAP managed services, the other 50%, supports both Fortune 1000 and Midmarket 24/7 across 20-plus SAP skill sets. While our projects tend to be technical in nature, HANA, UX, Soulman, we likewise provide deliverable-based SAP functional, business process, and PMO services. And here's a quick list of the services that we and support that we offer. Obviously, today we'll be focusing on personas. Our speaker today is Peter Spielvogel. Peter leads the go-to-market activities for SAP Screen Personas. That's a solution that allows customers to drive productivity through personalization. Peter, along with a few colleagues, has published an ebook on using SAP Screen Personas through SAP Press, and has also created an online training course with OpenSAP. He is a frequent blogger on the SAP Community Network and enjoys discussing UX simplification with customers. Peter brings more than 20 years of experience in marketing, product management, sales, and software development to this role. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Peter. Peter, take it away.
All right. Thank you for that great introduction, Jake. Let me give a little bit of background. My first interaction with NIMBL was several months ago at Teched. I was walking through the aisle, seeing what was new and exciting, and bumped into a booth that had SAP Screen Personas prominently up there, along with S4 Hana, Fiori, all the latest and greatest. So got to talking to a number of people in the booth, and we hit it off well, and they asked if I would talk about Screen Personas. And for any of you who know me, the answer is always yes to that. So really excited to be here today. In the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to cover a few different areas. One is the overview of what is Screen Personas, how does it fit into SAP's user experience strategy. I'll talk through a few customer examples that demonstrate that cutting access to drive productivity, demo how easy it is to use, talk about the business value, and give you some actionable next steps about how you can do that. Before I dig into the content, what I'd like to do is just get a little bit of sense of where you are in your journey around Screen Personas. Okay, pretty good, broad spectrum. Most people have heard about it but never seen it, so the next time we have this conversation, that'll be a different answer because you're going to see two separate demos of the product today. So let me move on from the poll here. So the theme of today's session, and I was inspired by this sword-wielding guy on NIMBL's website, but that's really what Screen Personas was about. When we started this journey about 4 or 5 years ago, one of our customers came to us and said, we love SAP, it has everything we need, but it also has a bunch of things we don't need. Can you just give us a quick, easy way where we can hide stuff that we don't need on the screen? Excess fields, tabs, screens, pop-ups. Help us simplify the screen so we can reduce the amount of training our people need and make the documentation much lighter. And I'm happy to say that we were able to accomplish that and a whole lot more. Here's just a few different varieties of the screens. I'm not going to talk through all of these, but let's talk about the one in the lower right corner, which I think is a great illustration of the power of productivity. This is a mining company. It's Fortescue Metals Group in Australia. And what they've done on this screen, which is admittedly small and hard to see, is they've created on the SMN screen a bunch of input fields and labels. And when they onboard a new employee, someone types the information into the screen, hits the enter button, and it updates PA 30, which is the HR, setting up the employee in the HR system. It updates transaction SU01, updating the person in the IT system, and with one screen, one transaction, one click, someone is now populating 2 transactions. So instead of going to 2 screens, introducing opportunities for error, now they've got a really, really simple way to interact with SAP. And there's a similar story behind all of the screens on here. We don't have time to talk through those today, but the thing that you want to take away from here is companies can use screen personas across every one of the 25 industries that SAP serves and every line of business. So we've got high-tech, education, food, energy, chemicals, aerospace on here, and HR, IT, manufacturing, purchasing, really everything around that. So now I'm just going to give you a quick demo, so now you won't be able to say that you've never seen it before. So I'm going to share my screen here. And now you should see my desktop. And what you're looking at is SAP Screen Personas. The first thing to notice is it's just running in a simple browser. You may be more familiar with this version, which is the web GUI. SAP Screen Personas 3, which is what we're looking at now, is built into the SAP GUI for HTML, also known as the web GUI. What we add to that is something called a flavor bar, and a flavor is just a variation of the screen, generally role-based, that lets you do whatever you want. So here's one example of how I can make this screen look. Just some simple buttons on it. This is another screen. We've given it the gradient to look like the Fiori Launchpad. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later in the session. But from a productivity standpoint, this is that same SMN transaction. And if I type a button, if I type something into this field and click on the button, you'll notice that this has gone out to another transaction, in this case VA03, display sales order, and I now see the amount and the currency from that. If I put in a different one and click on it, you'll see that that button, those numbers change. So what I've done is, instead of having to memorize this set of keystrokes of VA03, come to this screen, which really doesn't add a lot of value, clicking on another button, this is the information that I pulled from there. So the productivity savings is I don't need to do all of those keystrokes. A lot of our customers will achieve a 50% keystroke savings by using screen personas and drive a lot of productivity. And if you just wanted to skip over that first screen in the sales order process, you could do that and come here. So you'd be skipping over that screen over there. Very quick and easy way to drive productivity. And what that allows you to do is run simple. So long before SAP came out with our Run Simple operating philosophy, which we introduced at Sapphire, not this year, but in 2014, that's what we were focused on. And with screen personas, you can simplify decision-making because you drive up adoption. The people who previously didn't want to take the time to learn SAP because it was too complicated, they didn't want to spend the time, now they have a chance to go in, easily get their work done, and if everything's happening inside of SAP, you have all the information you need to drive your business. The next one of these is simplifying business processes. You can stitch together a bunch of screens, a bunch of transactions even, using screen personas, and really simplifying. You'll see an example a little bit later where the business process is the screen, and as you step through, you're just moving box to box on there, and lots of things are happening behind the scenes. So a really powerful way to streamline and simplify. And finally, on the SAP usage, probably most of you are using the SAP GUI today. Maybe you're also using some Webdon Pro applications. Perhaps you have NWBC to stitch it together, SAP Portal. With screen personas and the Fiori Launchpad, you can standardize and have one single front door that gives you access to all things SAP. And your end users have one seamless experience. Everything looks the same, everything feels the same, and it's just a whole lot easier than having someone think, okay, I need to do this process step. Which door to SAP do I need to use? So that all goes away when you simplify with Screen Personas. You've probably heard a lot about SAP Fiori, which is the new user experience. The good news is there's a number of different ways that you can consume that. Out of the box, we're shipping over 600 Fiori HTML5 application templates, and you've probably heard about S4 Hana. That's built using a Fiori approach, Fiori user experience, and we're moving in that direction for both cloud and on-premise. And on the tool side, if you're not ready to update, if you're not ready to adopt the latest and greatest, you can use Screen Personas to modernize your user experience. If you want, you can apply a Fiori theme to it so you have a common look and feel. Or we have many customers that use their own customer branded design. In fact, last week, Cargill did a great demo, and they had their green and gray colors throughout because that's how they like to brand their IT and their enterprise applications for their business. If you think about SAP software, we break it down along a couple of dimensions. Along that y-axis, we've got either on-premise or cloud. Obviously, more and more customers are moving towards the cloud, but not everyone is there just yet. And for on-premise, whether you're using any database or SAP HANA, whether it's the Business Suite on HANA or the full S4 HANA on-premise, you can use Screen Personas to simplify those screens, streamline business processes, and really delight your users with a much nicer user experience. There have been a lot of questions that I've seen either in my inbox via email or also online about how does Screen Personas fit in with S4 HANA. As you probably know by now, access to the functionality is through the Fiori Launchpad, so you've got a screenshot over there. And if the transactions are already simplified, you're good to go. If they're not and you're accessing through the traditional interfaces, whether it's a classic DunPro screen or a Web DunPro application, Screen Personas can modify those and simplify it. You can give it the Fiori design. You can give it a standard or a customized Fiori theme, and everything launches cleanly from the Fiori Launchpad, either in a new window or in place, so your users have one clean, seamless experience throughout. This is an example of a Fiori Launchpad. This was created by one of our partners, and what they've done here is have a bunch of different tiles, and they launch different SAP technologies under the covers, but the end user just has one easy experience. So here we've got a simplified purchase rec, ME51N, some out-of-the-box Fiori apps, an NWBC screen, and tracking purchase orders through another Fiori app. It's also possible to launch custom transactions from here. I've seen some beautiful examples of that in the consumer product space. And you can also have external content that you integrate into the Launchpad very easily. If you do want to create a Fiori-looking screen, we have a style guide available, basically a cookbook. You follow the steps, and you will have a screen that looks exactly like what you see here. Simple, role-based, delightful, and you can download that using the link that's on the slide. Here's one example of doing that. The screen on the right is the original transaction CO02, which is change production order. You can see it looks very much like a typical SAP GUI screen with a bunch of unlabeled buttons at the top with icons that you need to memorize and a whole bunch of tabs across the board. If you look at the screen on the left, I think you would all agree it's cleaner, simpler, and pretty much indistinguishable from a Fiori screen if you're familiar with what those look like. So we've talked a bit about screen personas. We've talked a bit about Fiori. The question I also hear quite often is, how do I know which product to use when? And the answer may be simpler than you think. The first thing to realize is you don't have to worry about the technology first. You need to understand what the problem is. And if you're familiar with design thinking, that's all about problem finding as opposed to problem solving. So work closely with your users, understand what the user experience problems are, and then look at the app catalog. If there's a Fiori app available, take it, and you're done. If an app doesn't exist that does exactly what you want to do, maybe you can modify it using Web IDE. If you can, then you end up with a Fiori app, and once again, you're finished. If the app doesn't exist, and as I said, we've got about 600 plus today out of roughly 10,000 transaction codes that we ship plus the custom one. So it's possible that what you're doing doesn't exist. But if you're using a SAP GUI screen or a WebDyn Pro ABAP application, then you can use Screen Personas to simplify that. If that's not the case, then you would need to develop it using the UI5 libraries. So with that, let me talk a little bit about how some customers are using Screen Personas to simplify their environment. This example is from Maxim Integrated. They presented at the Northern California ASUG meeting 2 weeks ago. Venkat was kind enough to share the stage with me, so we co-presented. This is their routing dashboard for a set of technology users inside of their company. You may notice that it's integrated into NetWeaver Business Client. Since Screen Personas is web-based, you can either run it directly from the browser, which is what you saw earlier in the demo, or you can run it built into NWBC. You can run it through the SAP portal. You can run it through the Fiori Launchpad. All of those are viable options. So the business challenge that they were setting out to solve, which they were able to solve using Screen Personas, some of you may have encountered some of these issues yourself. The screens are not intuitive, resulting in negative user experience. Even simple transactions have too many steps, and they've got to do extensive training for people. And for them, the master data, if it's routed inconsistently, it causes them various governance issues. And regarding master data, this was one interesting thing I learned when we were beta testing originally with a very highly regulated customer, or a customer in a highly regulated industry. They said that for them, any master data trickles down to 70 downstream systems. So if something's wrong in the master data, it causes a lot of problems downstream. So for them, it was really important, as it is for Maxim, to simplify that. This is their Create Routing header screen. You can see on the left a fair bit of material on there along with those buttons. The simplified version appears on the right. Their goal in using Screen Personas was to create a simple role-based dashboard, simplify SAP GUI. This is back to that ninja sword in the beginning. Remove tabs, buttons, fields, anything that someone didn't need to enter on the screen, they were able to get rid of and automate some of the steps that people typically had to type through. The results, in my view, are extremely impressive. This is the details screen. So on the left, those are all the fields that used to pop up in front of the user that they had to go through and figure out what to type where. On the right is the simplified version. And one number here jumps out at me, and that's the 112 fields hidden. So think about the complexity of the screen on the left. And if you remove 112 fields, that's 112 opportunities for error that are now gone. No one's going to type the wrong value into one of those, or even type the correct value in the incorrect box, which also causes a bunch of problems downstream. And what's noteworthy about this is all of the work that they did was done at a business analyst level. No development resources required at all. And you'll see the scripting later, which sounds intimidating, especially since it has the power of JavaScript behind it. But as you'll soon see, it's easy enough for even someone in product marketing to make a simple script in Screen Personas. Another example is Bemis, who's a leader in packaging material. If you've ever shopped in a supermarket and picked up a packaged item in any sort of shrink wrap, you're probably dealing with some Bemis technology on there. Their challenges were very similar to Maxim, so I didn't bother to put them on here. They did a lot of automation behind the scenes, and this is where I said that the process steps are built into the home screen. So they've got the purchase order on the left, creating a batch, and then creating the inbound delivery. So a person would just step through these sequentially, and each of these drives several transactions behind the system. So this was a build slide. Unfortunately, it doesn't come up in the system, but there's 3 different screens here. ME23N, which is notoriously complex, one of the more common ones that we see our customers using Screen Personas to simplify, along with some of the VA transactions are also very popular. Then VL31N, creating the delivery, and this screen you're looking at is to modify packing materials. Very simple, very clean. Everything is labeled neatly, and you'll notice here they didn't bother with any sort of theming or visual enhancement. All they wanted to do was simplify the process and make life easier for their users. The business impact was quite significant in this. They were able to shave off 6 minutes per transaction, which maybe it sounds like a lot to you, maybe it doesn't, but when you think about the fact that they run 1,000 inbound deliveries per plant each month through there, and they've got 10 plants live, this adds up to some real monetary savings, 1,000 person hours per month. If you think about how much they're paying the warehouse people, this really adds up, and they've got 25 more plants that they're in the process of rolling this out to, so some major savings over there. One more customer example I'd like to share. This one I like is because it demonstrates the speed of deployment. This is an IT application for their help desk. They were able to start talking about Screen Personas and deliver it live to 1,000 users inside of a month. They opted to go for very much of an app-looking template here, give it a look and feel that you might see on a tablet, even though they're running it on a desktop system. You can see they've got some big icons that are fairly intuitive. The person clicks, they go to the transaction. Again, they're running this through the NetWeaver Business Client. Could be Fiori Launchpad, Portal, or the browser. And very simple and straightforward. So out of the 30 days, and I'm going to set up the next polling question here, out of the 30 days that were spent on this project, what is your guess as to how many days they spent building the screens out of the 30? Okay, well, most of you realize that the screen building part is a relatively small part of the process. It turns out that the people who picked E, 3 days, was the correct answer. And very significant, the first week, most critical, mapping the business processes, understanding the problems that people face, and watching them in action. We'll talk a little bit more about the process later on. 3 days building the screens, and then the rest of it is just testing, documentation, user training, etc. And if you consider any sort of rework involved, maybe if you picked 6 days, I would consider yourself also correct in your answer on the polling question over there. But really, the important time is up front, understanding the requirements, then building it, and then the change management is always significant. And in some cases, we've seen some customers where they roll out a new version of the process and the efficiency drops temporarily and then it comes back up. I think Cargill characterized it best. They said 1 step backwards and 10 steps forward. So you may have a little dip for those power users who can enter everything with their eyes closed, tabbing through, but Once they learn the new process, they're going to have half as many keystrokes, so undoubtedly they're going to be significantly more efficient with that. So now I've talked about how easy it is to use, how building the screens is the easiest part of the process. I'm going to now show you that. Before I go into the demo, I want to mention that I will be demoing on Screen Personas 3. We released this in July of this year. We've had over 1,000 downloads since then. This is the all HTML5 based version. The editor is built into the SAP GUI for HTML, also known as the Web GUI. And once you make those modifications in the Web GUI, you have the choice of either rendering it in the Web GUI, which you would need to do if you're going the Fiori web-based route, or if you're still using the classic SAP GUI for Windows, you can also render your screens through that. The scripting engine is JavaScript-based, gives you a lot of power, a lot of flexibility, as well as quite advanced editing tools and debugging through the browser. We've got much easier Fiori integration, either to embed the flavors directly into the Fiori Launchpad or build Fiori-looking designs. And we also give you the ability to simplify S4 Hana screens, either ones that you're looking at through the classic GUIs, or as many of you probably have some customizations in your system or custom transactions. If you carry those over to S4, you'll be able to make those look exactly like everything else in S4 using Screen Personas. And also, this version gives you the ability to edit WebDyn Pro ABAP screens, which I am not going to demo today. So let me go back and share my screen once again, the browser. Hopefully I've not timed out at this point. So what's happening now is I've clicked on the plus sign to create a new flavor. And as I said, a flavor is just a variation of the screen. So if you think about the roles, let's talk about sales orders. Maybe you've got VA03 where you're displaying the sales order. A salesperson might be very interested in the revenue attached to that opportunity. Someone in the shipping department probably doesn't care too much about that, but they do care about the size of the package and how much it weighs. And perhaps someone in export control is looking at a different set of information. And instead of clicking through a bunch of screens, you can personalize it so each person gets exactly what they need to do their job quickly and easily. So here I am. I've got the editor on the screen, and I can just click on whatever I want to get rid of and hide it. I'll hide these two toolbars. Any label that appears on the screen, you can change. This was something that Maxim Integrated did. They had some business terminology they used that didn't match the standard SAP, so they were able to change that to make it much easier for people to understand what was going on. So I'll hide this also, and now I'm going to keep this very simple. I'll insert a transaction button. The label will say New Sales Order, and the transaction code is VA01. Once I enter that information on the screen, that is encoded into that button, and whoever's using the system no longer needs to know what the transaction code is. So a great way to simplify. Most millennials entering the workforce really have no interest in memorizing hundreds of or even dozens of transaction codes. I'm now going to create a script button, which is going to do the action we did earlier. I'll move that over here, and I can multi-select by holding down the Control key. And when I go back to Home, I'll make these buttons a little bigger, and I can align these at the top, and we're set over there. Now I'll go back. I need a couple of things for my script. You may recall I'll need a text field to type information into the script, and I'll also need some labels. We'll just call that one label A. That's going to have the amount that comes back from the script when we capture it. And I'll also create another label. We'll call that C, which is going to hold the currency, assuming we're a global company. So now I've got all the building blocks on the screen. If I go back to home, I can also assign a background image. Let me just search. I'll take the Fiori gradient, and now I've got a nice background for it. I can save and exit. For scripting, I'm going to use a different window. We've got a built-in development environment. In Personas for debugging, you can use the browser, but as you'll see, it's very simple. I'll create a new script, call it lookup, and just start recording my keystrokes. So over here, I'll go in to put in my transaction code via 03, enter an order number, click the Sales tab, and I just want to pull this information back to that home screen. So let me stop recording, and I click on my Object Inspector, and whatever's highlighted, you'll see in the window on the lower right, it changes. So now I've got a label, and this is a text field. So let me click on that, and I'll bring over the ID from that. Need to do that at the bottom. And I'll click on this again, and I want to get the currency and quickly bring that over. So you'll see I've got some JavaScript showing up in my console here, but I didn't have to write any of it, which is probably a good thing. So now I'll start recording again, and I'm going to go back. And you'll notice the back button is popping up again, and here I am on the screen. And that's my basic script. I need to make a couple of modifications to make it work. First, I need to capture the information from this box. So I can grab the information, the ID of that box over there. And this is where the JavaScript comes in. We'll call this variable order, and it's going to be equal to that. And instead of having the hard-coded field here, this will also be order. So it's going to take it from the screen, paste it in. Then it goes down to the transaction. If you recall what we had going on here, this was the number we wanted to pull back. So we'll call this the amount is equal to that. Remember the semicolon at the end. And this one we'll call currency. And we're just about done. So I've gone to the transaction, defined some variables, but I need to put it back on the screen. So for the amount, I need to put it over there. Again, don't need to memorize anything, just point and click, drag and drop sort of functionality. And this one is going to be equal to the amount, and this one is going to be equal to the currency. Let me save my script, type a number in here, and execute it. And sure enough, it goes to the back end, and we should see this number pop up over there. Okay, well, for some reason the script is not working. That's always the beauty of a live demo. Usually it does work. I'm not going to take the time to troubleshoot it over here, but that's fundamentally what you would need to do in order to make the script work. When you're done, you just exit. Then you would go back to the editor, click on your script button, script event for a button, you can have an on-click, click lookup. Now the lookup script is bound to this button, and it's all set to go. Then we can exit the editor. We'll try it again, but unfortunately, didn't work out today.
Hi, Peter. I'm getting a couple of notices in there. A couple of people saying that you missed the equal sign on set cur. I believe it was line 9.
Line 9. Great. Let's go back to the scripting.
Sure.
Save that. All right, thanks for the tip. Unfortunately, that didn't seem to do it. But if someone wants another demo, you know what? I'll send out a link when we have the recording. We'll send out a link to a demo where it works. How about that? In the interest of time. So let's go back here and talk a little bit about business value. While there's no licensing fee associated with it, it does take a little bit of time. Even if you're spending a month, you will probably need to justify the return on investment. And there's a couple of dimensions that we use and our customers use to figure that out. One is the user productivity. This is really straightforward. How many people are using the software? How much time do they spend on data entry? And what does it cost them? So one example, we've got one customer who's got some fairly complex equipment out in the field. And before Screen Personas, if someone called in, they'd use IW51 to create a notification, and it would take them roughly 10 minutes to do that over the phone with a call center rep. So that's a throughput of 6 transactions per hour. After Screen Personas, they were able to reduce that to somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes per transaction. So being conservative on the 3 side, that's 20 transactions per hour throughput, an improvement of 233%. So fairly typical. A lot of people are getting pretty good time reduction and click reductions on the information that they use through Screen Personas. Another dimension is improving adoption of business processes. A lot of the time, some customers will have various workarounds, or people don't want to use SAP because it's perceived as too difficult, so they're doing something in Excel, SharePoint, etc. If the information is not in SAP, you can't use it to drive business decisions and get the value out of HANA or even the standard business suite. So by using Screen Personas, if you can retire some of those other enterprise systems, there are significant cost savings associated with that in terms of licensing fee, maintenance, and so on. Another big area where companies are seeing some savings is in reduced cost of training. I'll give you 2 examples of that. The University of Warwick, which uses Screen Personas to simplify their plant maintenance. They call it the estates team, the groundskeepers, plumbers, electricians, the tradespeople who are out making sure everything runs smoothly at the university. They used to go through a 2-hour class and come out of it not that confident that they could do it in real life. With Screen Personas in place, it's so simplified that the class is 45 minutes, and about 20 minutes in, people are banging around on the live system, really confident, really comfortable with using it. Another example is Bemis. It was Cargill who had a 2-week training class for the contracts management. If you've ever seen a contract screen, they're among the most complex. 20 tabs, lots and lots of fields, and with Screen Personas, they were able to reduce the number of tabs down to about 3 and reduce the training from 2 weeks down to 1 week. And finally, this last one's a bit more subtle, but it's data quality. If you think about how many downstream systems your data touches, it may not be 70 like that customer in the highly regulated industry, but what does it cost you to fix errors in the system, and how many people are making errors? If you think back to that Maxim integrated example, they removed 112 fields from a single transaction. What is that going to do to the error rate? So a very powerful way to simplify your screens and improve the data in your enterprise. Now, you've got a background. I hope you're convinced that it's easy to use. And how do you get started? Screen Personas is part of a much bigger UX improvement process. And even though you can download the tool and start simplifying today, I would encourage you not to do that. You really want to focus on identifying the business processes that need the most work. It could be who is complaining the most in your enterprise, where are you spending a lot of money on training, where is there a high error rate, just where is there a lot of time on transaction where people are entering the same stuff time after time. So once you figure out where you want to do it, then you can look into simplifying the processes. And I really encourage you to use some sort of structured approach, such as design thinking, and observe the users in action. Don't just ask them, hey, what's the problem, what are you doing, but watch them. And when you watch people using SAP, you may uncover some really interesting hidden facts, such as they always go to another screen in the middle to look something up. Maybe they're pulling a piece of paper out of their desk to look something up, or checking a Post-it on their screen. Any of those things that are part of the overall process, even if they're not built into SAP, you can integrate that into your business process in Screen Personas and greatly simplify it. As you saw with the BMIS example, you can have the process steps illustrated right there on the screen. I've seen some utility customers also doing that. For creating notifications, you can change all the free text into radio buttons or pull downs to really standardize the information. Then as you look at the data requirements, what are the different paths that people take through the system? A lot of times people will do this process on a whiteboard. Maybe they'll do screen printouts of every single process step and then go through all those screens with a highlighter. Oh, we've got the blue path, we've got the green path, we've got the yellow path. Those might indicate that you've got 3 different groups and each of those needs a different flavor. And one thing to think about in terms of simplification, remember you can always leave the basic view unmodified available for people if they need it. So you can take those 80 or 90% use cases where most people go day to day, really trim those down and simplify it. And if necessary, for those 10% cases where they do need some field on an esoteric tab, all right, let them go in and do that every once in a while. But mostly they can follow that simple approach. Once you have all that information, then it's time to build the screens. It might be that you just go with an out-of-the-box Fiori app, or it might be that you'll use Screen Personas. You'll notice the asterisk. For every step of the way, you must validate with your users to make sure you're on the right track. It's very tempting to think that you know best what they need, but really spend the time with your users. It's an investment in time that will pay off significantly. Now, using Screen Personas is very much a team sport. There's no way, at least I haven't seen it in 4 years, where you can have one person who's an expert in every one of these areas. You certainly need someone who understands the business process, what transactions are behind the scenes, what's the data flow. Now, interestingly, we have one tech customer here in Silicon Valley, and the process expert they put on their Screen Personas didn't know anything about SAP, but she knew what needed to get done, and she was able to ask the questions, well, why are we doing it this way? And people said, well, we've got this transaction and that. They were able to simplify the screens from 30 fields down to 5 just because they were able to ask those hard questions and trim it out. Then you need the Screen Personas expert, someone who's going to do what I did, hopefully with some better scripting skills so they get them right the first time and write the scripts. And finally, you do need someone with design expertise who can observe the users and then create the designs. This should ideally be someone with some web design experience so they can create a really smooth user experience. A couple of the screens that we went through, namely the Bemis ones and the Maxim, didn't look that significantly different from the SAP GUI. They were simplified. The users were delighted by it, but I'd really encourage you to take the opportunity to either put your own branding or a Fiori branding or something that makes the screens look really modern, 2015, 2016 user experience, as opposed to sticking with the classic SAP GUI. So to summarize before we go to Q&A, SAP Screen Personas works with SAP GUI screens. These are DUNPro screens on a Windows or Mac desktop or a Windows 8 tablet. Also on WebDUNPro applications, you do need to be running the Business Suite ECC6 with Unicode or S4 Hana. I've got the kernel requirements listed over here. And for now, we're not supporting CRM, iPad, iPhone, or Android. And the reason comes back to the architecture. SAP Screen Personas is built into the SAP GUI for HTML, also known as the Web GUI, and Web GUI does not run on iPad, iPhone, or Android. We've heard from a lot of customers that this is important, so we are moving in that direction, but I can't give you a time frame for that. I've got some links here for more information. The product page is always a good starting point, especially since it's easy to remember, just sapscreenpersonas.com. We've got a Getting Started page on SCN. The Open SAP course is a great way to ramp up. It's 20 short modules, which will get you up to speed on Screen Personas 3. We've just introduced a new video series called Productivity Power Play, which are short tutorials about how to do various things using Screen Personas, and there's also the ebook. I've got my contact information here, so if your questions are not answered in the Q&A, we will be posting them online afterwards, but you can also reach out to me with any questions. So with that, let me turn it over to Jake to wrap up, and then we can take a look at the Q&A. So over to you.
All right, Peter. I want to say thank you so much for a very informative webinar. I was checking on the chat box, and we got a lot of great responses for the presentation as a whole. Just to let everybody know, everybody will receive an edited version of this presentation. We will be emailing that out within the next 48 hours. You can also see it on our YouTube channel, which would be NIMBL, N-I-M-B-L, on YouTube. Or you can go to our website, which is benimbl.com, B-E-N-I-M-B-L.com. Again, everyone will be receiving an edited version. So again, thank you so much for everybody for joining us. We had a great turnout. And Peter, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. I want to wish everybody a great weekend, and you'll be getting information about our up-and-coming webinars for 2016. Thank you so much, and have a great day.